The lottery ticket trembled in my hands as my mother delivered the crushing blow that would change everything. Aubree, your brother Derek needs that money for his startup. You'll give him half of that $960,000, or you can pack your bags tonight. I stared at her, my heart pounding, feeling the weight of 28 years of being second best crash down on me. The golden child dynamic had reached its breaking point. This ticket represented my freedom, but my family saw it as their salvation through their precious son Derek. Standing in that familiar living room, surrounded by family photos where Derek's achievements dominated every wall, I felt the familiar sting of being invisible. My whole life, I had watched my parents pour everything into my older brother while I scraped by on leftovers of their attention and resources. Derek got the college fund, the new car for graduation, the down payment for his wedding to Jessica. Meanwhile, I worked 3 jobs to pay for community college, drove a 15-year-old Honda that broke down twice a month, and lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat because it was all I could afford. The lottery ticket had been a desperate impulse buy with my last $20 before payday. $20 that should have gone toward groceries, but I was so tired of counting every penny while Derek lived like a prince. When those numbers matched, when I realized I had won $960,000, I thought maybe finally something good would happen to me. "This is ridiculous," I said, finding my voice. "Derek is 31 years old. He should be supporting himself by now." My father stepped forward, his face stern. "Family helps family, Aubree. Your brother has a brilliant idea for a tech startup. He just needs initial investor capital to get it off the ground." "What kind of startup?" I asked, though Derek's track record with his grand schemes was less than impressive. "It's complicated," Derek said, walking into the room with that same entitled swagger he'd had since childhood. "Something you probably wouldn't understand. But with your lottery money, I could finally launch properly." I stared at him, this golden child who had never heard the word no, who expected everything to be handed to him on a silver platter. "My money? You mean my money that I won?" "Come on, Aubree," Derek said, with that condescending smile I knew so well. "What are you going to do with that much money anyway? Probably waste it on something stupid. At least I have a real business plan." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "Derek has been working on this for months. He's so dedicated, staying up late, researching, networking with important people. This could make our whole family wealthy." That's when the real truth came out. Derek shifted uncomfortably, and my father's jaw tightened in a way that made my stomach drop. "There's something else," my father said slowly. "Derek's current project has hit some temporary setbacks. We've been helping him through a rough patch." "What kind of rough patch?" I demanded. The silence stretched until Derek finally admitted, "I needed some bridge funding while I was waiting for my other investors to come through. Mom and Dad were kind enough to lend me some money from their retirement account." My blood went cold. "How much money?" "It's not important," my mother said quickly. "What matters is family supporting each other. Derek will pay it all back once his business takes off." But I could see it in my father's eyes, the fear and desperation he was trying to hide. "How much, Dad?" $60,000, he whispered. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My parents had worked their entire lives, saved every penny for their retirement, and Derek had convinced them to hand over $60,000 for one of his schemes. "And how much has he made from this business so far?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Derek's silence was deafening. "He's still in the development phase," my mother said defensively. "Making mistakes is part of growing up, learning how to be an entrepreneur." Learning how to be an entrepreneur at 31 years old with my parents' retirement money. The same parents who told me I was too young to understand financial responsibility when I asked for help with college at 18. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Derek has lost $60,000 of your retirement savings, and now you want me to give him half of my lottery winnings so he can lose that too?" "It's not lost," Derek snapped. "It's an investment. And I'm not going to lose your money because this time I have a real plan." "Like you had a real plan for the food truck business? Or the cryptocurrency trading? Or the online marketing company?" Derek's face flushed red. Each of those ventures had failed spectacularly, leaving him deeper in debt and more desperate for the next big score. My parents exchanged a look, and I realized they knew. They knew about all of Derek's failures, all his broken promises, all his lies. But they kept believing in him anyway, kept throwing good money after bad because admitting the truth about their golden child was too painful. "This is different," my mother insisted. "Derek has matured. He's learned from his mistakes." But I could see it now, the pattern that had been invisible to me for so long. Derek wasn't learning from his mistakes. He was learning how to manipulate our parents more effectively, how to present his failures as learning experiences and his demands as opportunities. "I'm not giving him half my money," I said firmly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father's face hardened, and my mother's eyes filled with disappointed tears. "Then you're not the daughter we raised," my mother said quietly. "We taught you about family loyalty, about taking care of the people you love. If you can't see that Derek needs this help, then maybe you don't belong in this family." Derek crossed his arms, smug in his victory. He'd played this game before, pitting my love for my parents against my own self-interest, and he'd always won. But not this time. I walked to my childhood bedroom and started packing my clothes into a duffel bag. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was steady. For 28 years, I had bent myself into impossible shapes, trying to earn the love and respect my parents gave Derek freely. I had worked myself to exhaustion, sacrificed my dreams, and accepted scraps while Derek feasted. No more. When I came back downstairs with my bag, my parents were whispering furiously with Derek in the kitchen. They looked up when I appeared, hope and expectation in their faces. "I'm leaving," I announced. "Don't be dramatic," my father said. "Just sit down and let's talk about this like adults." I am being an adult. I'm making my own decisions with my own money. I headed toward the front door, my heart pounding but my steps steady. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back," my mother called after me. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, feeling the weight of that threat. But then I thought about the lottery ticket in my purse, about the freedom it represented, about the chance to finally live my own life instead of being a supporting character in Derek's story. I walked out the door and didn't look back. The motel room was dingy and smelled like stale cigarettes, but it was mine. For $49 a night, I had a bed, a bathroom, and most importantly, space to think without my family's expectations crushing down on me. I sat on the scratchy bedspread, staring at my phone as angry text messages poured in from Derek and my parents. They ranged from guilt trips about family loyalty, to threats about cutting me off forever, to desperate pleas for me to come to my senses. None of them seemed to understand that I was finally making perfect sense for the first time in my life. On the third day, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, expecting another family member trying to wear me down, but something made me pick up. "Aubree? This is your Aunt Diana." I nearly dropped the phone. Aunt Diana was my father's younger sister, but she had been excommunicated from the family when I was 18. I barely remembered her, just vague impressions of a woman with kind eyes and a warm laugh who used to bring me books when she visited. "Aunt Diana, how did you get my number?" "I have my ways," she said with a chuckle that sounded exactly like I remembered. "Listen, honey, I heard about what happened through the family grapevine. Well, not the official grapevine. Let's just say I still have one ally in that family who believes in telling the truth." I was too stunned to speak. For 10 years, Diana's name had been forbidden in our house. My parents acted like she had never existed. "I know this is probably confusing," she continued, "but I want you to know that what you did took incredible courage. I've been waiting for years for someone in that family to stand up to the Derek worship." "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Oh, sweetheart, you don't remember? You were so young when it all went down. I was the one who called out your parents for their obvious favoritism. I watched them drain their savings for Derek's first failed business while you were working double shifts at that diner to pay for textbooks." The memories came flooding back. I did remember, vaguely, a huge fight between Diana and my parents. There had been screaming, accusations, and then suddenly Diana was gone and her name was never mentioned again. "They cut me off because I wouldn't pretend Derek's failures were just learning experiences," Diana explained. "I couldn't watch them sacrifice you on the altar of his ego anymore. Where have you been all this time? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Vermont. I bought a bed and breakfast in a little town called Millbrook. It's been the best 10 years of my life, honestly. I've built a real community here, people who care about each other without all the toxic family drama. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine a life without constantly walking on eggshells, without having to earn love and approval. Aubree, I have a proposition for you, Diana said. Come stay with me for a while. Help me run the bed and breakfast, figure out what you want to do with your life and your lottery money without your family breathing down your neck. I don't know anything about running a bed and breakfast, I admitted. I didn't either when I started. But you know how to work hard, how to take care of people, how to solve problems. Those are the only skills you really need. Everything else can be learned. The offer was tempting, maybe too tempting. Why would you do this for me? You barely know me. Because you're my niece, and because I see myself in you. I know what it's like to be the family scapegoat, to have your worth measured against someone else's accomplishments. And I know how hard it is to break free from that cycle. That evening, I checked out of the motel and started driving north toward Vermont. The 6-hour drive gave me plenty of time to think about my childhood, about all the signs I had missed or ignored. I remembered Diana bringing me books about strong women who changed the world, while Derek got expensive toys and sports equipment. I remembered her asking me about my dreams, my plans, what I wanted to be when I grew up, while everyone else just assumed I would follow whatever path was easiest. I remembered the last family gathering she attended, when Derek announced he was dropping out of his master's program to pursue day trading full-time. My parents had been supportive, calling him brave and entrepreneurial. Diana had been the only one to ask practical questions about his business plan and backup strategies. The fight had started when Derek couldn't answer any of her questions, and my parents accused Diana of being negative and unsupportive. She had pointed out that they never questioned Derek's decisions but scrutinized everything I did. She's setting Derek up to fail by not teaching him accountability, I remembered Diana saying to my mother. And she's teaching Aubree that her role in life is to clean up other people's messes. At the time, I thought Diana was being mean to Derek. Now I realized she had been the only adult in my life who truly cared about my future. Millbrook, Vermont turned out to be the kind of small town that exists in postcards and romantic movies. Tree-lined streets, a quaint downtown with local shops, and Diana's bed and breakfast sitting on 5 acres of rolling hills like something out of a fairy tale. Diana met me in the driveway, and I was surprised by how little she had changed. She was 53 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, but she had the same warm eyes and infectious energy I remembered from childhood. "Welcome to Maple Grove Inn," she said, enveloping me in a hug that felt like coming home. "Your timing is perfect. We have guests checking in tomorrow, and I could use an extra pair of hands." The bed and breakfast was beautiful. All exposed beams and cozy fireplaces, with 6 guest rooms and a dining area that overlooked the mountains. Diana had clearly poured her heart into every detail, from the handmade quilts on the beds to the herb garden outside the kitchen window. "This is incredible," I breathed, standing in the main parlor. "You built all this yourself? With help from friends and a lot of trial and error?" Diana laughed. "The first year was rough. I made every mistake in the book. But the community here is amazing. People helped me learn, supported the business, became like family." As she showed me around, Diana introduced me to some of that chosen family. There was Marcus, the local carpenter who had helped renovate the inn and still stopped by for coffee every morning. Sarah, who ran the bakery in town and supplied fresh pastries for the breakfast service. Tom and Linda, a retired couple who helped with gardening and maintenance in exchange for free stays during the off-season. "This is what healthy relationships look like," Diana explained as we sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset over the mountains. "People who support each other because they want to, not because they're obligated to. People who celebrate your successes without feeling threatened by them." That night, lying in a comfortable bed in a room Diana had prepared specially for me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. For the first time since winning the lottery, I wasn't worried about someone trying to take it from me or guilt me into giving it away. I was finally free to figure out who I was when I wasn't busy being Derek's inferior sister. 3 weeks into my stay at Maple Grove Inn, I was starting to understand what Diana meant about healthy relationships. The guests were kind and appreciative, the work was challenging but fulfilling, and I was learning skills I never knew I wanted to develop. Diana had been teaching me everything from bookkeeping to menu planning to handling difficult customers with grace. I discovered I had a talent for hospitality, for making people feel welcome and cared for. Several guests had specifically mentioned my helpfulness in their online reviews. More importantly, I was starting to remember who I was underneath all the family baggage. I had forgotten that I was actually good at things, that I could learn quickly and solve problems creatively when I wasn't constantly being compared to Derek's supposed brilliance. I was in the kitchen, helping Diana prepare breakfast for our weekend guests, when I saw a familiar figure stumbling up the driveway. My heart sank as I recognized Derek's expensive SUV and his disheveled appearance. "Friend of yours?" Diana asked, following my gaze. "My brother," I said grimly. Derek looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was uncombed, his designer clothes were wrinkled, and he had the wild-eyed look of someone who hadn't slept in days. He banged on the front door like he was trying to break it down. "Aubree," he shouted. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." Diana and I exchanged glances. "I can handle this," she said quietly. "You don't owe him anything." But I knew Derek well enough to know he wouldn't give up easily. If I didn't face him now, he would just keep escalating until he disrupted Diana's business and peace of mind. I opened the door before he could start shouting again. "What do you want, Derek?" He pushed past me into the parlor, looking around with obvious disdain at the cozy, comfortable space. "So, this is where you've been hiding out. Playing house with the crazy aunt who got herself kicked out of the family. Diana isn't crazy. And I'm not hiding. I'm building a new life." Derek laughed bitterly. "A new life? Working as a maid in some backwoods inn? This is what you chose over helping your own family? What do you really want, Derek?" His facade cracked, and I saw the desperation underneath. "My life is falling apart, Aubree. Jessica is threatening to divorce me. She found out about some financial issues, and she's not being understanding about it." "What kind of financial issues?" Derek's hands were shaking as he ran them through his hair. "I borrowed some money from her college fund, just temporarily, until my business deals went through. But the deals fell through, and now she's acting like I committed some kind of crime." My stomach dropped. "You stole from Jessica's college fund?" "I didn't steal anything," Derek snapped. "I borrowed it. There's a difference, but she won't listen to reason. She's talking about taking the kids and leaving." "How much did you take?" $30,000. But that's not the point. The point is that my wife is being completely unreasonable, and my parents are having some kind of breakdown over their finances, and everything is falling apart because you're being selfish with that lottery money. I stared at him, amazed by his ability to make everything someone else's fault. "Derek, you stole $30,000 from your wife. Of course she's upset. I have a gambling problem, okay?" The words exploded out of him like he'd been holding them back for years. "It started in college, just playing poker with friends, but it got out of hand. I've been trying to win back what I lost, but the numbers keep getting bigger." The pieces started falling into place. All of Derek's failed business ventures, all the money he'd borrowed from our parents, all the desperate schemes and grand plans. It hadn't been about entrepreneurship at all. It had been about feeding an addiction. "How long?" I asked quietly. 10 years, maybe 12. I don't know exactly. It all kind of blurs together. Derek collapsed into one of Diana's antique chairs, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "I keep thinking I can fix it, win back enough to cover what I've lost and get ahead. But every time I get close, something goes wrong." "Have you told Mom and Dad about the gambling?" Derek's laugh was hollow. "Are you kidding? They think I'm some kind of business genius. They talk about my entrepreneurial spirit and my willingness to take risks. They have no idea that I've been throwing money away on stupid bets for over a decade." I felt a strange mixture of pity and rage. Pity for the addiction that had clearly destroyed his life, and rage that our parents had enabled it by constantly bailing him out and making excuses for his failures. "You need professional help, Derek. Gambling addiction is a real disease, but there are programs, therapists, support groups." "I don't need therapy," Derek said. his voice getting desperate again. I need money to fix this mess before Jessica leaves me and takes my kids. I need enough money to pay back what I borrowed and prove to her that I can be the husband and father she needs. With gambling winnings? No. Well, maybe just enough to get even, and then I'll stop. I swear, Aubree, this is my last chance. If you loan me half your lottery money, I can pay Jessica back, pay back Mom and Dad, and get a fresh start. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time. The golden child facade was gone, replaced by the reality of a man whose life had been destroyed by addiction and enablement. Our parents had spent 30 years teaching Derek that his problems were always someone else's responsibility to solve. I can't give you that money, Derek. Can't or won't. Both. Even if I wanted to help you, giving you money would just enable your addiction. You'll gamble it away just like you gambled away everything else. Derek's desperation turned to anger. So you're just going to let my family fall apart? You're going to let Jessica take my kids away from me? I'm not letting anything happen. You made these choices, Derek. You stole from Jessica. You stole from Mom and Dad. You've been lying to everyone for years. And you're perfect, right? You've never made a mistake in your precious life? I've made plenty of mistakes. But I've never stolen money from people I love. I've never put my family at risk to feed an addiction. Derek stood up, his face flushed with rage. You know what, Aubree? You're just jealous. You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad believed in me, that I had big dreams while you were content to be mediocre. Those weren't dreams, Derek. They were delusions. And Mom and Dad didn't believe in you. They enabled you. There's a difference. I'm not leaving here without that money, Derek said, his voice taking on a threatening tone. I'll camp out in this parking lot. I'll call everyone in town and tell them what kind of person you really are. I'll make sure your precious new life falls apart just like mine is. Diana appeared in the doorway, having clearly heard the raised voices. I think it's time for you to leave, she said calmly but firmly. Derek turned his anger on her. And I think it's time for you to mind your own business, you bitter old woman. This is between family members. Actually, this is my property, and you're disturbing my guests. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll call the sheriff. Derek looked between Diana and me, calculating his options. Finally, he pointed a finger at me. This isn't over, Aubree. When Mom and Dad lose their house and Jessica leaves me, it'll be on your head. You could have prevented all of this, but you chose to be selfish. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I watched through the window as he peeled out of the driveway, tires spinning on the gravel. You okay? Diana asked gently. I realized I was crying, but not from sadness. It was relief, the cathartic release of finally seeing my family dynamics clearly. Derek wasn't the golden child I had spent my life trying to measure up to. He was a sick man who had been enabled by parents who were too scared to face the truth about their son. I'm okay, I said, and for the first time in my life, I actually meant it. Life at Maple Grove Inn continued to be a revelation. Diana and I had developed a smooth working relationship, and I was genuinely considering her suggestion to invest some of my lottery money in expanding the business. The idea of owning property, of building something lasting and meaningful, appealed to me more than I had expected. I was researching potential additions to the inn when I saw the moving truck pull into the driveway. My heart sank as I recognized my parents climbing out of Derek's SUV behind it. Diana, I called, my voice tight with anxiety. We have a problem. She came to the window and whistled low. Well, this should be interesting. My parents looked older than when I had last seen them 3 weeks ago. My father's shoulders were slumped in defeat and my mother's face was drawn with stress. They approached the front door hesitantly, like they weren't sure of their welcome. Which they weren't. I opened the door before they could knock. Mom. Dad. What's going on? Hello, sweetheart, my mother said, her voice artificially bright. Surprise! We thought we'd come visit our daughter and see how she's doing. With a moving truck? My father cleared his throat. Well, there have been some developments at home. We sold the house. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. You sold the house? The house you've lived in for 35 years? Why? My parents exchanged the kind of look that married couples develop after decades together, full of meaning and resignation. "We needed the money," my mother said quietly. "For Derek." "How much money did you give him?" "All of it," my father admitted. "The $60,000 from our retirement, plus the equity from the house. About $200,000 total." I grabbed the door frame to steady myself. "You gave Derek $200,000? "He promised he could triple it," my mother said defensively. "He had this opportunity, this sure thing that just needed capital to get started. Let me guess. He lost it all." The silence was answer enough. "We don't have anywhere else to go," my father said, and I heard the desperation in his voice. "We thought, with your lottery money, maybe you could help us get back on our feet. We could all live here together, be a real family again." Diana appeared beside me, her face carefully neutral. "I think we should continue this conversation inside." We moved to the parlor, where my parents looked around with the same barely concealed disdain Derek had shown. This was clearly not what they considered appropriate accommodations for their golden years. "This is a lovely place," my mother said with forced politeness. "Very quaint." "It's Diana's business," I said. "She built it from nothing after you kicked her out of the family." "We didn't kick her out," my father protested. "She chose to leave because she couldn't accept Derek's ambition." "Derek's ambition," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling his gambling addiction now?" My parents went very still. "What gambling addiction?" my mother asked. I realized Derek had never told them the truth. Even after losing their life savings, he was still maintaining the fiction that he was a struggling entrepreneur instead of a compulsive gambler. "Derek doesn't have business ventures, Mom. He has a gambling problem that's been going on for over a decade. Every dollar you've given him has gone to feed his addiction." "That's not true," my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Derek explained everything. He had some bad luck with investments, but that's not the same as gambling." "What kind of investments?" Diana asked quietly. My parents couldn't answer because they had never asked for details. They had just handed over their money based on Derek's vague promises and their own desperate hope that their son would finally become the success story they needed him to be. "It doesn't matter now," my father said. "What's done is done. The question is what we do next." "We were hoping," my mother said, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she used when she wanted something, "that you would let us stay here while we figure things out. Just temporarily, until we can get back on our feet." "Stay here?" "Diana runs a business. This isn't a homeless shelter." "We wouldn't be any trouble," my mother assured me. "We could help with the work, earn our keep. And with your lottery money, you could expand this place, make it big enough for all of us to live comfortably." I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw them clearly for the first time. They weren't here because they missed me, or because they had realized their mistakes. They were here because they had run out of other options, and they needed my money to maintain their lifestyle. "What about Derek?" I asked. "Where's he going to live now that you've lost the house?" "He's staying with us, of course," my mother said. "Jessica kicked him out, but family sticks together. We'll all figure this out together." "Jessica kicked him out because he stole from her college fund." "That's between Derek and Jessica," my father said firmly. "We're not going to abandon our son just because his marriage hit a rough patch." A car door slammed outside, and through the window I saw Derek climbing out of his SUV again, this time with 2 small children and several suitcases. "You brought Derek and his kids here?" I asked, my voice rising. "Where else were they supposed to go?" my mother demanded. Jessica was being completely unreasonable, threatening to call the police just because of a little misunderstanding about money. "Derek needs a safe place to stay while he works things out." Derek came through the front door without knocking, carrying a sleeping toddler while a 6-year-old boy trailed behind him. The little boy looked around with wide, confused eyes. "Uncle Derek, where's Mommy?" the child asked. "Mommy's taking a little break," Derek said, his voice strained. "We're going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Aubree for a while." I looked at those children, innocent victims of Derek's addiction and my parents' enabling, and felt my heart break. But I also felt my resolve strengthen. This cycle had to stop somewhere, and it was going to stop with me. "No," I said quietly. "No, what?" my mother asked. "No, you can't all move in here. No, I'm not going to subsidize Derek's gambling addiction. No, I'm not going to enable this family's dysfunction anymore. Aubree, be reasonable, my father pleaded. We're family. We're supposed to take care of each other. Taking care of each other doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. It doesn't mean sacrificing your own future for someone else's addiction. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not. Derek stepped forward, still holding the sleeping child. So you're going to let your nephew and niece be homeless? You're going to punish innocent children because you're angry at me? It was a low blow, using the children as emotional weapons, but I could see the desperation behind Derek's manipulation. His addiction had cost him his wife, his home, his children's stability, and now he was trying to guilt me into fixing what he had broken. Those children shouldn't be homeless, I agreed. They should be with their mother, in a stable environment away from the chaos your addiction creates. Jessica won't even talk to me, Derek said, his voice breaking. She changed the locks, filed for a restraining order, won't let me see my own kids except for supervised visits. She's trying to destroy my relationship with my children. She's protecting them, I said gently. And maybe you should be grateful that someone is putting their needs first. My parents looked shocked at my bluntness, but I was past the point of pretending that Derek's behavior was acceptable just to keep the peace. So that's it? My mother asked, tears starting to flow. You're going to abandon us when we need you most? After everything we sacrificed to raise you? What did you sacrifice to raise me, Mom? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you sacrificed me to raise Derek. The words hung in the air like a slap. My parents stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. That's not fair, my father said. Isn't it? When I needed college money, you told me to take out loans because it would teach me responsibility. When Derek needed college money, you gave it to him because he was pursuing his dreams. When I needed a car, you told me to save up and buy my own. When Derek needed a car, you co-signed for a brand new one because he deserved nice things. We treated you both equally, my mother protested, but her voice was weak. No, you treated us according to your expectations. You expected Derek to be great, so you invested in his potential. You expected me to be ordinary, so you prepared me for disappointment. Diana had been quietly observing the family drama, but now she stepped forward. I think everyone needs to take a step back and consider what's really best for these children, she said, nodding toward Derek's kids. The children should be with their mother, I said firmly. Derek, you need to call Jessica and arrange to return them safely. And you all need to find somewhere else to stay because you're not staying here. Where are we supposed to go? My mother asked desperately. We don't have any money. Any friends who can help us. You're our only hope. I'll help you find temporary housing, help you apply for assistance programs, even help with some emergency expenses. But I won't enable this dysfunction anymore. And I won't let you use Derek's children as bargaining chips. Derek's face was turning red with rage. You sanctimonious bitch, he snarled. You think you're so much better than us now? You think winning some stupid lottery makes you special? Derek, my father warned. No, Dad. She needs to hear this. She's been jealous of me her whole life, and now she finally has something I want, so she's going to make us all pay. I looked at Derek, at his rage and desperation and complete inability to take responsibility for his choices, and I felt something shift inside me. The last remnant of the little girl who had spent her life trying to earn her family's love finally died. I'm not jealous of you, Derek, I said calmly. I pity you, and I'm not going to enable you anymore. I turned to my parents. You have a choice to make. You can continue enabling Derek's addiction and watch him destroy what's left of your family, or you can face reality and get him the help he needs. But either way, I'm not going to be part of the destruction anymore. If you kick us out, we'll have nothing, my mother sobbed. You already have nothing, I pointed out gently. Derek's addiction took everything. I can't give you back what you've lost, but I won't let him take any more. The room fell silent, except for my mother's quiet weeping and the soft breathing of the sleeping child in Derek's arms. Finally, Derek spoke. Fine, but don't come crying to us when your precious new life falls apart. Don't expect us to welcome you back into this family when you realize you made a mistake. I won't, I said simply. They left that afternoon, taking their moving truck and their desperation to a cheap motel in town. I watched them go with a mixture of sadness and relief, knowing I had just burned the last bridge to my old life. But I wasn't sorry. For the first time in my life, I had chosen my own well-being over my family's dysfunction, and it felt like finally learning how to breathe. 2 weeks after my family's disastrous visit, I was finally finding my equilibrium again. Diana and I had been discussing my investment in the inn seriously, and I was excited about the possibility of expanding the business and making it my permanent home. I was in town picking up supplies when I got the call from the bank that changed everything. "Miss Aubree Winters?" The voice was professional but concerned. "This is Janet Reynolds from First National Bank. We need to speak with you about some suspicious activity on your lottery winnings account." My blood went cold. "What kind of suspicious activity?" "Someone attempted to access your account using forged documents. They had what appeared to be a power of attorney giving them authority to manage your finances, but our fraud department flagged the signatures as potential forgeries." I nearly dropped the phone. "Who was it?" "A Derek Winters. He claimed to be your brother acting on your behalf due to a medical emergency." Of course it was Derek. Even after everything that had happened, even after I had made it crystal clear that I wouldn't give him money, he had tried to steal it. "The documents are definitely forged," I told Janet. "I never signed any power of attorney, and there's no medical emergency." "We thought as much. We've already contacted the police and the FBI, since this involves bank fraud and interstate activity. Detective Martinez will be calling you shortly to get a statement." I drove back to the inn in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Derek hadn't just asked for money this time. He had tried to steal it, using forged legal documents and lies about my health. Detective Martinez called within an hour. "Miss Winters, we've arrested Derek Winters in connection with the attempted fraud. During our investigation, we discovered this isn't his first offense." "What do you mean?" "Your brother has been systematically defrauding family members and employers for years. We found evidence of identity theft, credit card fraud, embezzlement, and multiple instances of forgery. The scope of Derek's criminal activity was staggering. He had been using my parents' identities to open credit cards and take out loans. He had stolen from 3 previous employers, including the elder care facility where he had worked as a financial advisor. He had forged signatures on dozens of documents over the past 5 years. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Based on what we've found so far, at least 8 years. Maybe longer. He's been very careful about targeting victims who were unlikely to press charges. Family members, elderly clients, people who trusted him or felt obligated to protect him. Your parents are listed as victims in several of these cases," Detective Martinez continued. "They may not even know about some of the fraud. We'll need to interview them as part of our investigation." I called my parents at the motel where they were staying, but they didn't believe me at first. "Derek wouldn't do something like that," my mother insisted. "There must be some mistake." "Mom, the police have evidence. Bank records, forged documents with your signatures, credit reports showing accounts you never opened." But Derek explained all of those. He was helping us with our finances because we were getting confused about all the paperwork. It took 3 hours and a visit from Detective Martinez before my parents finally accepted that their golden child was a criminal who had been systematically destroying their financial lives for years. My father aged a decade in that conversation. He sat in stunned silence as the detective laid out Derek's crimes. The stolen credit cards, the forged loans, the embezzled retirement money, the fake business expenses that had been charged to their accounts. "The total fraud we can prove so far is over $400,000, Detective Martinez said, and that's just what we've uncovered in the past week." My mother started crying, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from her soul. "How could he do this to us? We gave him everything." "Ma'am, people with gambling addictions often commit financial crimes to feed their habit," the detective explained gently. "They tell themselves it's temporary, that they'll pay it back when they win big, but the addiction makes them escalate their criminal behavior over time." The local newspaper picked up the story the next day. "Golden boy gone wrong. Local man arrested for massive family fraud." The article detailed Derek's arrest and the ongoing investigation, painting him as a predator who had targeted the people who trusted him most. My phone started ringing with calls from reporters wanting comments about my criminal brother and my lottery win that exposed family secrets. I stopped answering unknown numbers and asked Diana to screen my calls. Derek's wife, Jessica, called that evening. Her voice was shaky, but determined. Aubree, I wanted you to know that I'm cooperating with the police investigation. I've turned over all of Derek's financial records, computer files, everything I could find. How are you holding up? Better than I expected, honestly. I've been living in fear for years, wondering when Derek's lies would finally catch up with him. It's almost a relief to have everything out in the open. What about the kids? They're okay. They're too young to really understand what's happening. I told them Daddy made some mistakes and has to live somewhere else for a while to learn how to make better choices. Jessica's strength impressed me. She was protecting her children while still holding Derek accountable for his actions. I want you to know, Jessica continued, that I never expected you to give Derek that money. I was actually relieved when I heard you had stood up to him. Someone needed to finally say no. I wish I had said no years ago. We all did what we thought was best with the information we had. But Derek is a master manipulator. He knows exactly how to make people feel guilty for not enabling him. The jail allowed visitors on Saturdays. Against my better judgment, I went to see Derek. He looked terrible. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His hair was greasy, his face unshaven, and his eyes had the hollow look of someone who had finally run out of schemes. I suppose you're happy now, he said when he sat down across from me in the visiting room. I'm not happy, Derek. I'm sad. Sad for you, sad for your kids, sad for Mom and Dad. This is all your fault, you know. If you had just given me the money like family is supposed to do, none of this would have happened. I stared at him in amazement. Even sitting in jail, facing federal charges, he was still blaming everyone else for his choices. Derek, you tried to steal my identity to access my bank account. You forged legal documents. You've been committing crimes for years. I was desperate, he snapped. You forced me into this position by being selfish with money you didn't even earn. I earned that money by buying a lottery ticket with my own $20. Just like you earned this jail cell by making criminal choices for years. Derek's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw the little boy he had once been, before the addiction and the entitlement and the years of being enabled had turned him into someone unrecognizable. I'm sick, Aubree, he whispered. I know I'm sick, but I don't know how to stop. Every time I try to quit gambling, something goes wrong and I convince myself that just one more bet will fix everything. It was the first honest thing he had said in years. There are programs, I said gently. Treatment centers, support groups, therapists who specialize in gambling addiction. I can't afford treatment. I can't afford anything. I've lost my job, my house, my family, everything. Then maybe losing everything is what you needed to finally get serious about recovery. Derek looked up at me with something that might have been hope. Will you help me? If I get into a treatment program, will you help me pay for it? I thought about it carefully. This wasn't about giving Derek money to continue his destructive patterns. This was about helping him get the medical treatment he needed for a genuine disease. If you plead guilty to all the charges, if you cooperate fully with the investigation, if you make restitution to everyone you've hurt, then yes, I'll help you pay for legitimate addiction treatment. And what about after treatment? What about getting back on my feet, rebuilding my life? That's up to you, Derek. I'll help you get well, but I won't enable you. The difference is that treatment teaches you to take responsibility for your choices. Enabling teaches you that someone else will always clean up your messes. Derek was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. Okay, I'll plead guilty. It was a start. Not redemption, not forgiveness, but a recognition that the old patterns weren't working, and something had to change. Walking out of that jail, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. My family as I had known it was gone, destroyed by years of dysfunction and Derek's untreated addiction. But maybe, just maybe, something healthier could grow from the ashes. Derek's guilty plea made national news 3 weeks later. The story had everything reporters loved: family betrayal, gambling addiction, lottery money, and a criminal who had targeted elderly victims. News vans appeared in Millbrook, and suddenly our quiet Vermont town was the center of a media circus. Lottery winner's brother pleads guilty to elder fraud. read the headline in USA Today. The article detailed how Derek's crimes had extended far beyond our family to include dozens of elderly clients at his former workplace. My phone rang constantly with interview requests. Reporters wanted to know about our family dynamics, about why I had refused to give Derek the money, about whether I felt guilty for not preventing his crimes by enabling his addiction. Diana helped me navigate the media attention with remarkable grace. "You don't owe anyone your story," she reminded me. "But if you choose to tell it, make sure it's for the right reasons." I decided to do one interview with a journalist named Patricia Williams, who was writing a book about financial abuse within families. Patricia had contacted me not for sensational quotes, but because she believed my story could help other people recognize and escape similar situations. "Your case is unusual because you were able to break the cycle," Patricia explained during our interview. "Most family scapegoats continue enabling their abusers indefinitely because they're afraid of losing their family connections entirely." "I did lose my family connections," I pointed out. "You lost toxic connections. But you've gained healthy ones, haven't you?" She was right. The community at Maple Grove Inn had rallied around me during the media storm. Marcus brought extra firewood without being asked. Sarah delivered fresh bread every morning with encouraging notes. The guests who knew what was happening sent thoughtful cards and emails supporting my courage. 2 weeks after Derek's sentencing hearing, where he received 5 years in federal prison, I got an unexpected call from a television producer named James Mitchell. "Miss Winters, I'm developing a documentary about family favoritism and financial abuse. Your story would be the centerpiece, but I want to approach it thoughtfully, not sensationally." I was hesitant at first, but James sent me examples of his previous work. He had produced documentaries about addiction, family trauma, and recovery that were compassionate and educational rather than exploitative. The goal would be to help viewers recognize these patterns in their own families, James explained, to show that breaking away from toxic family dynamics is possible and necessary. Diana encouraged me to consider it. "Think about how isolated you felt before you understood what was happening," she said. "How many people are still trapped in similar situations because they think it's normal?" I agreed to participate in the documentary on the condition that the focus would be on healing and education, not just exposing my family's dysfunction. The filming took 3 months. James interviewed me, Diana, Jessica, some of Derek's former colleagues, and experts in gambling addiction and family trauma. He even interviewed my parents, who had been going through their own process of reckoning with their role in enabling Derek's addiction. Meanwhile, Derek's crimes had triggered a class action lawsuit against his former employer. The elder care facility had failed to properly screen their financial advisors and had ignored red flags about Derek's behavior for years. I was contacted by the lead attorney, Maria Santos, who explained that the elderly victims deserved compensation for their losses. "Your brother stole over $2 million from our clients," Maria explained. "Many of them are now facing financial hardship in their 80s and 90s because they trusted him with their life savings." The civil lawsuit was separate from the criminal charges Derek had already faced. This was about making the victims whole, about holding the company accountable for their negligence in hiring and supervising Derek. "How can I help?" I asked. "You have unique insight into Derek's patterns of manipulation and fraud. Your testimony could be crucial in establishing that his behavior was part of a long-term pattern that the company should have detected." I testified in the civil trial 6 months later. It was emotionally difficult to detail my family's dysfunction in open court, but the victims deserved justice. Many of them were in their 80s and 90s, people who had worked their entire lives to save for retirement, only to have Derek steal their security. The jury awarded the victims $12 million in damages. Derek's former employer was held liable for failing to protect vulnerable clients from a predator they should have identified and stopped years earlier. But the most unexpected consequence came 8 months after Derek's sentencing, when the documentary aired on national television. Breaking the Golden Chains, one family's journey from abuse to healing drew over 3 million viewers and sparked a national conversation about family favoritism and financial abuse. My email inbox filled with messages from people sharing their own stories, adult children who had been financially exploited by siblings, parents who recognized their own favoritism patterns, families who were beginning to have honest conversations about money, addiction, and accountability. A woman named Laura wrote, "I've been giving my son money for 15 years, watching him fail at every business venture while my daughter struggles to pay for college. Your story made me realize I've been enabling his irresponsibility while punishing her success." A man named Robert shared, "My brother has been borrowing money from our elderly parents for a decade. I never questioned it because they seemed willing to help him. After watching your documentary, I looked into their finances and discovered he's been forging checks. Thank you for helping me see the truth." The response was so overwhelming that Diana and I decided to create a foundation to help other families dealing with similar issues. The Maple Grove Foundation for Family Financial Justice started small, with information, resources, and referrals to appropriate professionals. But within 6 months, we were receiving calls from across the country. We hired Sarah from the bakery to handle administrative duties and Marcus to renovate a building in town that could serve as a counseling center. The foundation offered family mediation services, financial literacy education, and support groups for people recovering from financial abuse. My parents had been watching from the sidelines during this entire process. They had cooperated with the criminal investigation, testified in the civil trial, and begun attending counseling to understand their role in enabling Derek's addiction. A year after Derek went to prison, they asked to meet with me at the foundation office. They looked different. Older, certainly, but also more grounded somehow. The desperate anxiety that had driven them to enable Derek's behavior for so long had been replaced by a quiet sadness mixed with genuine remorse. "We came to apologize," my father said simply. "Not just for what happened with the lottery money, but for years of treating you like you were less important than Derek." My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We convinced ourselves that Derek needed more help because he was struggling, but the truth is we were just afraid to hold him accountable. It was easier to bail him out than to face the fact that our son was destroying himself. We treated you like you were supposed to be strong enough to handle anything," my father continued, "while we protected Derek from every consequence of his choices. We realize now that we failed you both. We failed you by not giving you the support you deserved, and we failed Derek by not teaching him to be responsible for his actions." I had imagined this conversation countless times over the past year, but I had never expected it to feel this way. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just sad for all the years we had lost to dysfunction and denial. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully, "but I need to know that you understand this isn't just about saying sorry. It's about changing fundamental patterns that have existed for decades." "We're in counseling," my mother said, "both individually and together. We're learning about codependency and enabling behaviors. We're trying to understand how we got so lost. And we're volunteering here at the foundation," my father added, "helping other families recognize the warning signs we ignored for so long." I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw something I had never seen before: humility. The arrogant certainty that had driven their favoritism toward Derek was gone, replaced by genuine self-reflection and a desire to make amends. "I'm willing to rebuild a relationship with you," I said slowly. "But it has to be different this time. It has to be based on honesty and mutual respect, not on family obligations or guilt." "We understand," my mother said. "And we want you to know that we're proud of you, not just for winning the lottery, but for having the courage to break away from our dysfunction, for building something meaningful with your life, for helping other families heal." It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. There was still pain, still years of damage to work through. But it was a beginning, a foundation for something healthier. The documentary won an Emmy for Outstanding Documentary Programming. At the awards ceremony, I dedicated the award to all the families still trapped in cycles of financial abuse and favoritism. "Change is possible," I said from the podium, "but it requires courage to face uncomfortable truths and to choose healing over enabling. Every family dealing with these issues deserves to know that there is hope." 2 years after walking out of my parents' house with a duffel bag and a lottery ticket, I stood in the main hall of the expanded Maple Grove Inn and Foundation Center, watching families from across the country participate in our first annual healing retreat. The bed and breakfast had grown into a comprehensive healing center. We offered week-long programs for families dealing with financial abuse, addiction, and favoritism patterns. Therapists, financial counselors, and family mediators worked with participants to break destructive cycles and build healthier relationships. Derek had been released from federal prison 6 months earlier after serving 3 years of his 5-year sentence. True to his word, he had cooperated fully with the investigation and entered a residential gambling addiction treatment program. The Derek who emerged from prison was quieter, humbler, and for the first time in his adult life, genuinely accountable for his actions. He was living in a halfway house 3 hours away, working at a grocery store and attending daily recovery meetings. He had asked to visit the foundation, but I had asked him to wait until he had a full year of sobriety and financial stability. I need to know that you're committed to recovery for its own sake, I had explained during one of our monthly phone calls. Not just because you want something from me. Derek had accepted this boundary without argument, which was perhaps the strongest evidence of his genuine change. Jessica had rebuilt her life beautifully. She had finished her college degree, found work as a nurse, and was raising her children in a stable, peaceful environment. The kids saw Derek during supervised visits twice a month, enough to maintain a relationship without disrupting their sense of security. They need to know their father, Jessica had explained. But they also need to be protected from his addiction. The supervised visits ensure that Derek has support if he's struggling, and the kids have protection if something goes wrong. My parents had become some of our most effective volunteers. Their personal experience with enabling behaviors, combined with their genuine remorse and commitment to change, made them uniquely qualified to help other parents recognize similar patterns in their own families. They had moved to a modest apartment in Millbrook and lived quietly, volunteering at the foundation, maintaining their own therapy schedule, and slowly rebuilding their relationship with me based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. We spent 30 years creating damage, my father had said during one of our weekly dinners. We figure it might take 30 years to fully heal from it, but we're committed to doing the work. The foundation had helped over 500 families in its first 18 months of operation. We had expanded to include online support groups, educational webinars, and partnerships with financial institutions to help people recover from family financial abuse. Dr. Amanda Chen, our lead family therapist, had documented remarkable success rates. Families who completed our intensive program showed significant improvements in communication, boundary setting, and financial decision-making. The key, Dr. Chen often explained to new participants, is helping people understand the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. Support helps people grow stronger. Enabling keeps them dependent and prevents them from learning to solve their own problems. On this particular morning, I was preparing to lead a workshop for adult children who had been financially exploited by family members. It was always the most emotionally challenging session, as participants shared stories remarkably similar to my own. A woman named Caroline raised her hand during the discussion. My sister has borrowed over $50,000 from me over the past 5 years. Every time I say no, she threatens to cut me off from my nieces and nephews. I love those kids, but I'm starting to realize that giving her money isn't actually helping anyone. What would happen, I asked gently, if you told your sister that you love her and want to support her, but you won't be giving her any more money? What would that conversation look like? Caroline's eyes filled with tears. She would be furious. She would probably follow through on her threat to keep me away from the kids. And how would you feel about that? Heartbroken, but also maybe relieved? I'm so tired of being afraid every time she calls, knowing she probably wants money. This was the moment when healing often began, when people recognized that their fear of setting boundaries was actually causing more pain than the boundaries themselves would cause. Setting boundaries with people we love is one of the hardest things we can do, I told the group. But boundaries aren't punishments. They're guidelines for healthy relationships. When we enable someone's destructive behavior, we're not showing love, we're showing fear. After the workshop, I walked through the gardens behind the Foundation Center. Diana and I had planted them together the previous spring, creating a peaceful space where families could reflect and heal. Marcus approached me carrying his toolbox. He had been installing new benches donated by a family whose healing journey had been featured in a follow-up documentary. The Patterson family called, he said. They wanted you to know that their son completed his addiction treatment program and found a job. They said learning to set boundaries with him saved their family. These success stories arrived regularly now. Families who had broken cycles of enabling and abuse, who had learned to love each other without destroying themselves in the process. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. 6 months clean and sober today. Thank you for not giving up on me, but also thank you for not enabling me. I'm finally learning what real love looks like. I smiled and put the phone away. Derek still had years of work ahead of him, rebuilding trust with his children, making amends to his victims, learning to live without the adrenaline rush of gambling. But for the first time in his adult life, he was doing the work himself, instead of expecting someone else to fix his problems. Diana found me in the garden as the sun was setting over the mountains. At 65, she had more energy than people half her age, and her bed and breakfast had become the most successful hospitality business in the region. "Good day?" she asked, settling beside me on one of the new benches. "Really good day. I got an email from a family in Oregon. They said our online program helped them recognize that their adult son's financial problems were actually symptoms of a gambling addiction. They're getting him into treatment instead of continuing to bail him out." Diana nodded with satisfaction. "You know what I'm most proud of about all this?" "What?" "You could have used your lottery money to hide from your problems, to build walls between yourself and your family's dysfunction. Instead, you used it to heal and to help other people heal. That takes real character." I thought about the 28-year-old woman who had walked out of her parents' house 2 years earlier, heartbroken and confused but determined to choose self-respect over family approval. She could never have imagined that her moment of courage would lead to this: a thriving business, a meaningful mission, and relationships based on genuine love and respect. That evening, we hosted our monthly community dinner at the foundation. Families in various stages of their healing journeys shared meals and stories, supporting each other through the difficult work of changing generational patterns. My parents were helping serve dinner, my mother chatting easily with participants while my father organized the children's activities. They had found purpose in their volunteer work, using their mistakes to help others avoid similar pain. "Could I have everyone's attention for a moment?" I called out as dinner was winding down. The room quieted, families turning to listen. 2 years ago, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I chose to walk away from family relationships that were hurting me and hurting the people I loved. It was terrifying because I didn't know if healing was possible or if I would lose my family forever. I looked around the room at faces representing hundreds of families who had made similar choices. What I've learned is that real love sometimes requires us to stop enabling destructive behavior. Real love sometimes means setting boundaries that feel harsh but are actually protective. Real love sometimes means allowing people to face the consequences of their choices so they can learn and grow. The foundation exists because every family deserves to experience relationships based on mutual respect, honest communication, and healthy boundaries. We can't change our past, but we can change our future. We can break cycles of abuse and addiction. We can choose healing over enabling, and we can do it together. The applause was warm and sustained, but more importantly, I saw hope in the faces around me. Hope that change was possible, that families could heal, that love could exist without manipulation or enabling. As I had learned myself, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's destruction. Sometimes walking away is the first step toward real healing. And sometimes, if we're very lucky and very committed to the work, we can find our way back to each other as healthier, whole people. The lottery ticket had given me financial freedom, but the real prize was learning to value myself enough to demand healthy relationships. That lesson was worth far more than $960,000. As families said their goodbyes and headed home to continue their healing journeys, I reflected on how different my life had become. I had lost the family I grew up with, but gained a community of people committed to growth and healing. I had discovered my own strength and found my life's purpose in helping others discover theirs. Standing in the Foundation Center that night, surrounded by evidence of healing and hope, I knew that every difficult choice had led me to exactly where I was meant to be. What do you think is the most important lesson from this story? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this story if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that healing is possible. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that choosing to value yourself is never selfish. It's the foundation for all healthy relationships.